the first thing we're going to talk about is level of detail. And that's one of the most critical things for understanding what type of calculation you need to use, whether it's just calculated field, a table calc, or an LOD. Those are, that's the most fundamental concept you need to know before you understand which calculation to pick. So quick, if somebody could see, I can't see everybody. This is kind of sneaky. Who wants to, Carlos? Since you're helping me monitor, I'm going to pick you for a question as well. So you've got double duty today.
Okay.
What does level of detail mean?
Level of detail. Well, I'll try. I guess how far. Oh, let me admit some people first. The level of, I guess, the fields that you want to keep, I guess, when making a calculation, like for instance, if by a property, right, you want it to break it down by by that level of detail, by that field. That's
okay. Does anybody want to expand upon that? I've got lots of bugs in here.
Hey, this is Tom. I'll give it a try.
Okay, Tom.
So I think level of detail really has to do with the granularity of your data. So for example, if you had sales teams and you had regions, you might want to calculate total sales over regions, but then have a level of detail to do total sales over the company. So you could do a percentage. What percentage the regions could do over the total. That's very high level, but
yeah. So Tom, why don't you keep going here? So in the picture you see on the screen, what is my level of detail?
It would be by product and date.
By product and date. I don't see either of those fields in the view.
Oh, category. I'm sorry. I just looked at the attributes. I wasn't looking.
Okay, so by category and date.
In year,
yeah.
Okay, category and year, right? Does anybody want to disagree with that? So thumbs. How about a thumbs up if you disagree? Oh, no thumbs ups. You could do reactions. Okay, Melissa, what is the level of detail of this view?
Well, company is in there somewhere.
Yeah, company as well, right? So the level of granularity or the level of detail is company, category, and year. Okay, so Tom, does that make sense? Why it would be company as well?
Yeah, I wasn't looking at the marks. I was just looking at the graph. Okay. So
yeah,
sorry. You're right.
No
That's
problem.
right.
So in Tableau, the level of detail is defined by the dimensions that are on the columns and the rows. Do we have any dimensions on our rows here? We have dimensions or measures on our rows. Anyone? They're all very quiet today. We have rows. Or sorry, we have rows. We have a measure on the rows, so that does not count as our level of granularity. And then any dimensions that you have on color, size, label, detail, path, or shape, if you happen to be using shapes. So those would be the level of granularity. So the marks, everything on the marks card adds granularity to the view, except for the tooltip. Everything on the tooltip has to be aggregated. How many of you have seen the attribute when you drop something onto a tooltip or a dimension onto tooltip? How many of you have seen it turn into an attribute, ATTR? Yeah. Great. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how I can, just give me 1 second here. I'm trying to figure out how I can change the view on my screen. Okay, I'll worry about it later. I'm trying to figure out change layout. There we go. Tiled. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to increase the number of people showing in the screen. Hide tiles without video. Ah, there we go. Okay, great. So yeah, so it's going to be the level of granularity is defined by the fields that are placed on the rows, columns, shelves, as well as the marked card. But it's not just fields, right? Because sum of profit is a field. It's the dimensions that are on those views. So dimensions are what split up the view. Every time you add a dimension to the view, you get more marks. And by marks, I mean the number of things that Tableau is drawing. Okay, so level of detail then means every time you add a dimension to the view, you are increasing the level of detail, meaning you're breaking it down into smaller parts. Okay, so in this particular example here, so James Donder, what is our level of detail of this view here?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. The level of detail would be the product.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Look at the definition. Look at the definition on the left-hand side. So each dimension added to the view increases the level of detail. So what dimensions do we have on the view?
Category, customer state, and product.
Exactly. So that defines our level of detail for this particular view.
So all three.
So all three. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
If I put, let's say I put, I don't know, customer name on here as well, then customer name breaks down the data into more parts, meaning it adds granularity or it increases the level of detail.
Got it.
Okay. Oh, I need to go back and forth between the screens here. Okay, so the level of detail is particularly important when you want to perform different types of analysis. We're going to get to this in a minute when we talk about table calculations and level of detail expressions. So I'm just going to skip over this a bit. Now, there's two types of calculated fields. So we've talked about level of detail. Does anybody have questions before I move on about what I mean by level of detail? If you do, just unmute yourself because I can't see everybody. Lisa, did you find the workbook, by the way?
I sure did. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. No.
Andy,
Yes.
Andy, one question. So for level of details, should that not be the lowest level of granularity?
Well, in what I was talking about before, the level of detail, I'm not talking about the lowest level of detail. I'm talking about the level of detail of the view.
Yeah, so of this view, for example, I'm assuming category is product category, right? So in this case, would the granularity not be product and customer state?
It depends if every product belongs to a category.
Okay.
Technically, yeah. I mean, each product does belong to a category, but I would still say that all three of them define the granularity, just in case.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's kind of a subtle difference there. Okay, any other questions before we move on to calculated fields? Okay. All right. So there's two different types of calculated fields, and they are basically fields that you create using formulas to help transform or summarize existing data. We're not talking about table calculations. We're not talking about LODs. We're talking about regular calculations, regular calculated fields. And they can be broken down into two types. There's an aggregate calculation and a non-aggregate calculation. So, Katie Kilroy, which one of these is an aggregate calculation and which one is a non-aggregate calculation?
The top is an aggregate.
Are you sure? What makes it an aggregate?
Oh, yeah. So it's, you're summing HR and dividing it by the sum of H. Whereas the bottom,
yeah, that's
I
okay.
don't know how to describe the bottom. I don't know how to say it, but I know
the denominator.
The
denominator.
Yeah, sorry. I mean your bottom image. I don't know how to describe that, but I know that it's not aggregate.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we'll get into kind of what it means to have a non-aggregate versus an aggregate calculation. We've kind of gone through the last couple of weeks in some of the classes in Next Level Tableau. We've talked a bit about different ways to define non-aggregate, and one of the ways that we came up with as a group was making it seem like it's like a data source calculation. In other words, it's like adding an extra column into an Excel spreadsheet. That's what a non-aggregate calculation does. Okay, if you could think of it that way, that's a good way to think about it. So you've got a spreadsheet open. Everybody's probably added a column in an Excel spreadsheet that has a calculation, right? Has everybody done that before? That's a non-aggregate calculation, right? Because you're doing it cell by cell in Excel. Nice rhyme there. You're doing it cell by cell, so that is a non-aggregate calculation. Okay, so when we talk about aggregate calculations, the idea there is you want to combine data in order to make a summarized or a smaller set of values, right? So a smaller set of values meaning less detail than the most granular detail in the view. So for example, we could be looking at total sales per year, right? So year is our only dimension in the view. We need to summarize the sales to get it for that year. Okay, that would be an example of an aggregate calculation. Does everybody have the workbook open? I sent 2 of them for different versions because I never know what somebody's on. So if you can go ahead and open up the workbook, we're going to look at an example of an aggregate calculation. And this is baseball data. So if you don't know anything about baseball, don't worry about it. Treat it like Superstore. If you know cricket, it's relatively similar. So ridiculous number of stats like cricket has. Okay, so what we want to look at is, let's say that we want to know the number of hits. So H is hits. I'll try to make sure I use both the word and the abbreviations. So if we drag year, let's see, the year field up near the top to the columns, you'll see we get 1 column for each year. And if you look on the very bottom left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that we now have 24 marks. You can see me drawing on the screen. That means our level of granularity, so our year has 24 fields in it, or 24 records in it. Okay, so we've gone from, we're now aggregating the data up to 24 different points. And now take the field, if you go down into the measures, if you take the field that says like H and drag that to the rows, so that's called hits, we can see that we have the, we have an aggregate calculation, like a sum, that is an aggregate calculation. And what we're doing here is we have a much more aggregated type of, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for now? So the year is only 1 field in the data set. It's nowhere near the lowest level of granularity. So we need to aggregate the data in order to present it at that level. Does that make sense? Hope that makes a bit of sense. Okay. So let's look at another example then. So create a new sheet. And this time let's bring the, where's the team name? The team is near the top. So let's drag the team to the rows. And when you drag a measure when you drag a field from the measures into the view, Tableau will by default try to aggregate that data point. Okay, that's why they're down there. And any fields that are in measures are typically things you want to aggregate. So let's drag weight to the columns. And this is the total weight per team, which is kind of a weird metric, right? But it doesn't really make sense to do the total weight of a team. Actually, let's do something else. Let's, instead of team, because there's a couple that are, let's drag you should see a field called franchise down a bit toward the bottom of the dimensions area. So drag that on top of team and replace team with franchise. Okay, that looks a bit better. For those of you that know baseball, the LA teams, they became Anaheim, and then it was the LA Angels, and then back to something else, and whatever, however 50 names they've been under in the last 20 years. Okay, so this is adding up the weight of the players for a team. Now that, I mean, it is a valid metric, right? But it doesn't really make a lot of sense. We would probably typically look at something like the average weight of the players. All right, so to do that, we're going to right click on the sum of weight field on the columns, or you can click the little triangle drop down. And down in the middle, there's a section called measure. And we're changing it to an average. There's probably, yeah, so the teams are pretty much all the same size, right? The players are pretty much all the same size, or the average size between the players. And this is, let's see, this would be pounds, I believe. Yeah, it's not kilos. That would be a bit ridiculous, like 400-pound players. Do any of the Americans know how to compute kilos to pounds? What's the multiplier?
2.2.
2.2. Very good. Who is that? 2.246. Now Caroline's just showing off. Okay. All right. Well, I thought that was going to be a harder question since the Americans are so good with the metric system. Google will tell you. Yeah, I usually just do what, like 80 pounds in kilograms, something like that, right? Does anybody else just search like that? 80 pounds in kilos, something like that?
Yes, sadly I do.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to do it. Okay, so does that make a bit more sense what Tableau is doing there, right? So we are looking at, if I go back to our definition here, we are summarizing the data at a specific level. That's what an aggregate calculation does. So in the last example, we were summarizing the data, or summarizing the average weight, or taking the average weight by franchise, right? So we're not doing it at the lowest level of granularity, so we need to aggregate the data. Any questions on that? Yes, somebody?
That's over all 20 years, right?
Correct. It's over the entire data set. Yep. So it would be the same thing. The average weight would be the same thing as what, adding up all of the weight of the players and dividing by the number of players. You would get the same number. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Listen.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so if we go back here, let me switch back over to another screen. And one of the things to be aware of is with aggregate calculations, Tableau automatically applies them when you drag a field into the view. So if you drag a measure onto the rows or the columns or one of the shelves, Tableau is going to automatically apply an aggregation. So by default, Tableau will create an aggregation. Okay, so if we, for example, if we go back over to Tableau and create a new sheet, if we drag, let's just drag the HR field, so that's home runs. Let's just drag that to the rows. And you'll see Tableau automatically applied a aggregation to it, right? So when you drag a measure in, Tableau is going to automatically apply an aggregation. Okay, make sense? Good, okay. And then, so the aggregations, or the level of detail of the view. So we were looking at, in this last example, we were looking at franchise, right? So that's our level of detail of the view. So that's what controls our aggregation, right? We're aggregating the data to the franchise level. So for example here, here's another example at the bottom. We could sum up the home runs by year to provide a yearly summary, or we could sum them up by player ID to give a player level breakdown. Okay, so let's go back over to Tableau, and we're going to create a view that's going to kind of mix some things up. Let's say that we want to compare a couple of dimensions. Let's drag maybe, let's say home runs to the columns. And how about RBI to the rows? And right now, Tableau is aggregating those together. We only have one mark. So if you look at the very bottom left-hand side of your screen, you'll see there's one mark in the view. Everybody see one mark there? Okay. And that's, why do we only have one mark at this point? So Colin, you're on my upper left. Oh, he's not listening. He's talking to somebody else. Okay, Colin, I was calling you just as you went to talk to somebody else. What is my level of detail of the view right now?
The scope actually is showing up without any dimension, where we can categorize into on the HR and RBI measures. So that's why we're only seeing one scatter plot, single icon.
So what is my level of granularity of the view?
It's higher level.
Okay, but what level of granularity?
The whole data set?
The average, the average
the entire data set.
The entire data set, correct.
Yeah, the entire data set, right? Because we haven't told Tableau how to split up the data. Okay, so if we then want to, let's say, look at it by player ID, we could, let's see, we could drag player ID onto the detail. And now we're looking at what is our level of granularity now? So Rob Tullo, what is our level of granularity now?
It'd be at the player, so you'd have one mark for every distinct player in the data set.
Exactly right. Yep. And if I look at, for example, this mark here, so I guess it's Albert Pujols. It says 703 home runs and 2,218 RBIs. Is that my lowest level of granularity?
For this,
for that particular mark?
Yeah, you can drill into more if you added more dimensions, but for what we know now, it's his entire history that he's done.
Exactly. So it's the number of home runs for that player over the entire data set. And it's the number of RBIs for that player over the entire data set. Okay. Make sense? Okay. Excellent. And then if we add, let's say that we add the year field to the detail. Okay, so let's see. Lisa, what is our level of detail now?
It's the player ID and year.
Player ID and year. Exactly. Because they're the dimensions that are in the view. So now we have 31,508 marks. So that's the number of combinations of year and player. So you could think of the concatenating those together. Okay, so that's our level of detail. And that's kind of, we're aggregating the data to that level of detail. Okay, so these are some of the different aggregations you might use. So sum, count, count distinct, average, min, max, etc. And these operate on multiple rows of data and return a single value. So I want us to do something else here. If you could create a new sheet, I thought of a different way to try to explain level of detail or aggregate versus non-aggregate. If everybody could click on the little plus at the top to connect to a new data source. And everybody should have Superstore, sample Superstore, somewhere there. So just go ahead and pick. I've got two of them, so I'm going to guess which one. I always guess the wrong one. And of course, I guess the wrong one. Do you all have one like this that already has some of the, it already has a calculation for profit ratio? Do some of you have that? Some of you don't?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Okay. All right. We'll stick with that data set then. Okay. So in this,
for public, do you not have that in your list?
Do you have a different Superstore in your list, Melissa?
I don't have any Superstore in my list, but I'll find it somewhere. So don't worry about it.
Okay. First off, let's try to figure out what the lowest level of granularity for this data set is. So we have something called order ID, right? So let's drag order ID to the rows. And we can see that we have 5,111 marks. Okay. And just watch for now. If I go to a new sheet and I just drag on this orders count field, you'll see that I have 10,194. So that tells me how many records are in the data set. So if this says 10,194 and my orders is 5,111, am I at the lowest level of granularity? I can't be, right?
No.
So we know that that is not the lowest level of granularity. So there's something farther down into level of granularity for the order ID. Okay, so maybe it's the product ID. So if you open up the little product hierarchy field and you drag, let's see, well, we've got product name. So let's drag product name into the rows. And we're getting closer. We've got 10,183. And what I say it was over here, 10,194. So we're not quite there, are we? We're not quite there. So let's go let's see what else we could do here. So I'm going to click on the little triangle. If you click on the triangle up next to the search bar in the data pane, go down and you should have an option that says show hidden fields. So if I have that one called show hidden fields, so click on that and you should see one called row ID grayed out. You see a grayed out row ID. Okay, so I want you to right click on that row ID field and choose unhide. Oh, I just realized I'm not even speaking into my microphone. Is that better?
Yeah.
It's in stereo now. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. And then there's also one called product ID. So we probably want to unhide the product ID as well, because you could have the same product name, but maybe there's a new model of it and it's got a different ID the next year, right? So that would kind of make sense. And then once you have those unhidden, I want you to click on that triangle again at the top and uncheck the show hidden fields option, right? So just be aware that in Tableau, sometimes the default data sources have hidden fields in them. And that can make it tough to find the level of granularity. Okay, so the row ID field, this field represents the combination of order ID and whatever product was purchased. So again, picture the example.
For the spin to stop, and then we'll take a walk.
So the way that I like to describe this is you've got a checkout basket on Amazon. You've got, or if you go to look at your Amazon history, you can look at the order ID, and then you'll have multiple products inside of the order ID. There might be just one product in that order ID. There might be multiple products. So let's drag the row ID field onto the rows shelf. Okay, and here's a perfect example of what happened. So if you see here for this Echo Glide, that's really hard to say, Echo Glide Clips. I want to say Clyde Glips. Echo Glide Clips, you see there's two different row IDs. Okay. So we've added granularity to the data set. And if you look on the bottom left-hand side now, it says 10,194. And if we go over to, let me get rid of that. If we go back over to the other sheet, we've got 10,194. Okay, so we've found the lowest level of granularity in the data set. Okay. So it's really important to understand what that lowest level is, because then if you aren't using the lowest level, or for example, if you are ever using a view that does not have the combination of order ID and row ID, or even just row ID, then you are not at the lowest level of granularity. Therefore, you're creating an aggregate calculation. Okay, so let's take product name off of the view. So we're left with just order ID and row ID. And what I want you to do now is I want you to hold your right click down, or on a Mac, it's Option, and drag order ID to the rows and pick order date discrete. And then click on OK. Maida, do you have a question? Maida?
Could you repeat what you just did?
Oh, so which part? Well, let me just go back. So do you have,
you have the order ID, the product name.
Yeah, so take the product name off of the view.
Okay.
And then are you on a Mac or a PC?
On a PC.
Okay, so you want to hold your right click down and drag order date to the rows.
Date. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and you should get the little pop-up screen. And you want to pick order date discrete.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And then click on OK. So now this tells us the date of each item that was ordered. So let's see if we can find an example here. I want to see if I can find an example where for a particular order, it was spread across multiple days. Okay, we're probably not going to find that. Okay, so what I want to do is I want us to look at the, let's also drag, let's put category in the view as well, but put it to the, put it to the left of order ID. So we got order ID, row ID, category, and order date. Okay, everybody good there? Okay. So what I want you to do now is I want you to right click and drag order date to the rows again. And when it pops up, I want you to choose the option that says min order date, right? So min is one of our aggregations.
The option, Andy, that option doesn't work for me. I'm not sure why. Doesn't bring that.
Are you on a Mac or a PC?
Yeah, Mac.
Yeah, you should be. It's just option for me, unless your keyboard's different.
Maybe. Yeah.
If it doesn't work, just drag order ID on again,
and choose
and
this.
then if you right click on it, go down to measure and minimum.
You said order ID, not order date. That's why.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, order date. No, that's fine.
I was just seeing if you are paying attention. That's all. And notice now that each of our minimum order dates is the same as our order date, right? Because we're at the lowest level of granularity. Make sense? Okay, let's right click and drag order date to the rows again. And this time let's pick our maximum date. And it probably makes it a green field initially. Is that right? Okay. So if it makes it a green field, right click on it and change it to discrete. So fourth option from the bottom. Okay, so now we have our min and our max, and they're both the same, and they're both equal to order date because we're at our lowest level of granularity. Okay, make sense so far? Okay, so what I want us to do.
I have
Yes.
a question. I mean, order dates for a discrete order number, why would the order dates be different from min and max? I can see that the order dates would be different by customer name, but not by a discrete order number because the order number is placed on a date.
So the order date could go across multiple dates.
Okay.
But for now, what we're trying to do is look at the lowest level of granularity, and what we should see is that all of these are the same, right? Going across the view, every row is the same.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Okay, and what we want to do now is let's go ahead and take order ID, or sorry, no, let's take row ID off of the view. And we should see pretty much everywhere it's still going to match, right? Or there might be some variances here and there. But if we take order ID off of the view now, you'll see that we have every individual order date for the category. Okay, because order date here, this order date is a discrete dimension, right? It's a dimension, it's not a measure. It's a dimension because it is not aggregated. That's returning every order date that existed for the furniture category. And our min and our max are still the same as order date because if you have one date, the min and the max have to be the same, right? We can't, if we only have one order date for June the 6th, we can't have a different min and a max. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so if we look at furniture, our order date here, our first order date is January the 6th. And if I scroll down, I don't know how far I need to scroll. My maximum order date is 12/30, okay, December 30th of 2024. All right, so let's take order date off of the view. So when we take order date off of the view, are we increasing the granularity or are we decreasing the granularity? So Lisa Colby, since you're on my screen.
Decreasing.
Decreasing the level of granularity, okay? So if we take order date off, we should end up with, so if you look at the very bottom left-hand side of the screen, I have 2,882 marks. When you take a dimension off of the view, that number should either stay where it is or go down. Okay, if it stays where it is, that means you didn't change the level of granularity. But if we drag order date off of the view now, you'll see we only have 3 records. We only have 3 marks, right? And our min and our max are basically looking at the entire category and pulling back the first date and the last date. Okay. Does that help clarify a bit, aggregate versus non-aggregate? Yeah. Okay. I thought of the dates example this morning, so I'm quite proud of myself for that. Okay, so if we look at, okay, I think we did all of these home runs by year, average height per team. We did average weight. Okay, so when we look at non-aggregate calculations, these are calculations that operate on a single row of data at a time. Going back to our Excel example, it's like adding a column in an Excel spreadsheet and doing a calculation for each individual row. That is what a non-aggregate calculation does. So the way that I like to think about it is Tableau is doing the calculation back in the data source, and then it brings it back into Tableau. So it's almost like Tableau is adding a column back in the original data and then bringing that back in. Okay, so that's a good way to think about it. But what it's doing is it's not summarizing the data. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples of that. So we wouldn't use, this should be non-aggregate functions, not no aggregate. I guess the same thing, non-aggregate and no aggregate, I guess means the same. So non-aggregate functions, you wouldn't see things like sum, average, count, min, max, but you will instead see things like mathematical operators like plus, minus, divided by, if, then, else, things like that. Okay, now you could still see plus, minus, in an aggregate calculation, but you will not see any aggregation functions like sum, count, count distinct in a non-aggregate calculation. So let's look at a couple of examples of that. Oh, sorry. And when you create a calculated field using Tableau's little calculator window, Tableau does not automatically perform an aggregation on that. You have to tell Tableau with the functions in the calculation whether it should aggregate the calculation or not. If you don't specify aggregations, Tableau will not aggregate it. It'll do a row level calculation. Okay, before I move on, that's a very, very important point. If you have a question, please raise your hand. And I really need to figure out how to show. Yes, Lakshmi? Sorry, Lakshmi?
Lakshmi. Yeah. So you meant to say that we have to change it to aggregate or non-aggregate using any functions? Like,
so if you're using a function like, so you're in the calculation window, and if you use a function like a sum or a min or a max, that's making it an aggregate calculation.
Correct.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So if I'm using sum, min, max, any of the functions, then it's aggregating. Otherwise, it's not aggregating.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Sure.
Exactly right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. We shall move on then. And do make sure that you ask questions along the way, because I want to make sure that you understand. I'd rather go slower and take more time than go quickly and you not understand everything. All right, so let's look at a couple of examples. So we're going to look at something like extra base hits and strikeout rate and height to weight ratio. Okay, so let's go back over to Tableau and switch back over to the MLB batting data source. So just click on that data source on the left-hand side. And we're going to start by looking at the lowest level of granularity in this data set. So that's going to be year. So drag year to the rows and drag player ID to the rows. Okay, and it's going to add all members. And there we go, right? So that's each individual player for each individual year. So what we want to do here is we want to calculate the number of extra base hits. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. We're going to calculate it together. Okay, so let's create a new, actually, before we do that, an extra base hit is defined as a couple of, well, let's drag the field that says to be or not to be, drag that on top of where it says ABC. So that's going to give us a table. Okay, and then take the field that says 3B and drag that on top of those numbers until you see it say show me. If you don't see show me, then you didn't drop it in the right place. And you should now see a table with 2 columns, one for 2B and one for 3B. And we also now, what Tableau did is it added this field in the columns called measure names. It swapped out the field on the text for a field called measure values. And then it gave us an additional shelf called measure values. Let's take the HR field and let's drag that one onto, you can either drop it on top of the numbers where it says show me, or you could put it on this measure values shelf. Okay, so we've got 3 numbers next to each other. And our total extra base hits is these 3 numbers added together. Okay, so let's create a new calculated field. So click the drop down on the data pane and choose create calculated field. And I'm going to call this extra base hits. Yes, Maida?
I have a question. When you have direct us to grab a dimension and drag in, it makes a difference whether you drag in with your right click or
Yes.
left click. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so if I drag in a field with a right click, whenever you drag a field into the view with a right click, Tableau will pop up this menu.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. You get a different list of things depending on whether it's a dimension or a measure.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you might want to right click and drag it in if you know that you need to change the aggregation from the default. So you see where it says sum BB in bold?
Okay. Okay.
That means it's the default. That's the default aggregation for that field.
Okay.
Did anybody know that?
So that was doing right click. So when you drag it with a right click, it tends to bring in dimensions and give you an option of aggregations.
Yes. So if I right click and drag a dimension into the view, let's just say here, I get a different list of things.
And with the left, you do it with the left?
If you do it with the left, it just drags the field in. It doesn't do it. It just adds it at either a dimension or a measure.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I noticed the difference. I'm like, I don't know. I never paid attention.
And I was just going to say, it's different when you actually drag it in with a date field. It'll select that automatically for you.
Yeah. So if you, well, when you drag a date, oh, we don't have a date field here, but if I go back over to Superstore and I drag in a date, by default, it'll just break it down to whatever level. But if you right click, and I almost always right click and drag a date field into the view and bring up this window. So you get a lot more options with dates because Tableau can split a date apart into whatever level of granularity you want. Okay, so let's see. So we want to create this calculated field called extra base hits. Extra base hits. If I could spell. And this is going to be our doubles. So if I go down here to the data pane, I can drag in the 2B field. And we're going to add to that 3B. And we're going to add to that HR. Sometimes you'll see Tableau try to pre-populate the field for you. It doesn't like doing that if it starts with a number. So if I type in, if I start with 2, it doesn't start populating the field. But if I start with an H, it's going to start bringing in fields that start with an H. So it doesn't like numbers. And then click on OK, and let's drag that field to the measure values. Okay, and now we get something like that, right? So we've done a non-aggregate calculations. So we're looking row by row and trying to decide what, or we're adding them together. Okay. So the next one we want to look at is something called a strikeout rate. So a strikeout rate is defined as the number of strikeouts divided by the number of at-bats. Okay, so let's create a new calculated field. And let's call it, I'll call it SO ratio, just so you know which field it is. This is probably like learning a new language for many of you. So our strikeout ratio is the SO field. So that's in the measures. And we want to divide that by the AB field. And then click on OK and bring that field onto the measure value shelf. And we get some kind of ratio. We probably should, let's see. Let's bring the SO field on as well, and the AB field on as well. That way we can kind of see the math that it's doing as we go across. We're building a pretty big table here. But you see we have 38 strikeouts over 215 at-bats, so that's 20% roughly. And now because we're at the lowest level of granularity, right, we Tableau will calculate this properly. If I create a new sheet, and let's say this time I want to look at it by, let's drag franchise onto the rows. Yes, Sofyan?
I mean, even it's a low level. If we use an aggregation there and we do some H divided by some AB, will give us same results, but with performance will be that same, or?
So it will give you, yeah, it'll give you the same value because you're at the lowest level of granularity. Performance wise, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Let's see. I would think that an aggregate calculation would be faster because it's less data. That would be my assumption.
Sure.
But that's, I don't know the exact answer. Okay, so we've got franchise here. And if we go down toward the bottom, we have a field called SO ratio. Okay, so let's drag that field onto the ABCs. Okay, so how do you, oh, I didn't see that question that just came up. Let me see. Come on, let's go to the chat. How do you find the data that is available at which level? So Prashant, you meaning how do we find the lowest level of granularity?
Yeah, Andy, yeah.
So you, well,
generally when we write this LOD and all that time, it is very useful to get the data is available at which level, granular level.
Yes, so you might have missed that. You might have missed that earlier if you hopped on late. But the way that I figure out the level of granularity is the first thing I'll do is I'll bring on the number of records. Maybe I'll just put it on text. And that's the number I want to try to match to get to my lowest level of granularity. So I'll drag fields into the view. Typically, ID fields are a good place to start in order to figure out my lowest level of granularity. Okay. Yep. Okay. So if we go back over here, so we did a ratio, right? And a ratio of strikeouts to hits. You can't strike out more times than you've tried. So that doesn't make any sense. How can we have a number that's 195, right? So let's think about this. A ratio is going to be a percentage. Okay, so let's go back to the previous sheet where we have our big table. And let's represent the strikeout ratio as a percentage. But we want to do that by default. So on the left-hand side, where we have SO ratio, if you right click on that field, go to default properties, and then number format. Okay, so right click on SO ratio, default properties, number format, and let's just pick percentage. We'll leave it at 2 decimals for now. That's fine. And click on OK. And you'll see here, none of the numbers go away. Here we go. So we have a bit of an issue here, right? Because this one goes over 100. You see that there? So this actually means we're not at the lowest level of granularity, because it's impossible for us to strike out more than we've tried. So it's an impossibility. So this is actually not at the lowest level of granularity. Okay, so that's good. It's good that we found that. So what we would need to do then is we probably need to look at perhaps this player played for more than one team in a season. That's an option, right? Players get traded. So let's go down to the teams section. And I'm going to try to keep an eye on this player. So this is GA01. Okay. Let's drag franchise onto the rows. And let's see if that player played for more than one franchise. There we go, right? So here we go. So that player played for more than one franchise. If we go to the lowest level of granularity, you'll see the math is right. Okay. Let's go back over to our other sheet then, where we have the franchise, and now it's 19,000%. Everybody agree that's impossible?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what Tableau is doing there, you see how it's taken our ratio and it's wrapped it in a sum. If we go back to what we talked about before, if you have a non-aggregate field and you drag it into the view, Tableau is going to try to aggregate it for you. That's what Tableau does by default. It'll try to aggregate that field for you. But we know that's not right. So a lot of times what I'll see then is I'll see somebody say, okay, well, I'll just take the average of that. Right? It seems, so if I right click on that field on the text shelf and I go down to measure and then average, oh, okay, so that looks better now. Everybody agree that looks better? Is it right? We don't know. Because now we're at an aggregate level. So from kind of a mathematical order of what Tableau is doing for this particular example, where's my calculation here? What Tableau is doing is it's going to the data source and it's calculating this ratio. And then it's bringing the data back into Tableau and is trying to take the average at the franchise level. Okay, so it's first doing the division and then doing the aggregation. What we want is we want it to do the aggregation and then the division in order to get the proper ratio. So let's see what I mean by that. Let's drag the SO field on top of the numbers, right? So we should get a second column now for the number of strikeouts. And let's drag AB onto the measure value shelf. And notice those both say sum. Okay, somebody is, I think, calling their dog or something.
Cheryl, you're not on mute.
Thanks, Colin. Okay, so now if we look at those numbers at the top, so we've got what, 25,914 divided by 129,391, we get 20%, not 27.9%. So while the average seemed like a reasonable number, it's actually wrong. Okay, so when we want to do an aggregate calculation, yes, Maida?
I got a question. How did you do that division on the fly?
Well, I'm on a Mac, so I just, on Mac, I just do control space.
Okay, thanks.
So what we want to do is we first want to calculate what we want to do right at the franchise level is we want to look at this 25,914 and we want to divide that by the 129,391. But those are both aggregated numbers already. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is we're saying take the sum of strikeouts and divide it by the sum of at-bats. Okay, so let's create another calculated field. And I'm going to call this one SO ratio aggregated. And this is where building things out as a table first is very helpful. I see Lisa shaking her head. She's been in classes before. So I've built it out as a table, and I know, okay, I want to take that 25,000 and divide it by the 129,000. Well, that 25,000 is just my sum of SO field. So I'm just going to drag that in. And you see it automatically keeps the calculation or the aggregation. And then we want to divide by the sum of AB. So from a mathematical order of operations, Tableau is aggregating the sum of the strikeouts, it's aggregating the sum of the at-bats, and then it's doing the division. Previously, it was doing the division and then the aggregation. Is that clear what it's doing? Anybody have a question? Yes, Sofyan?
Yeah, sorry, Andy. Going back to my question, so to be on the safe side, is it we always use the aggregation with this kind of calculation? So we always aggregate even if we are on the lowest level. So the measure will work even when we go up a level?
Yes. So most of the time, yes. We could go through a use case here in a second where that wouldn't be what you would want to do.
Okay.
But generally, yes. I would just start with the aggregates.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Melissa?
I think my question is related. It seems like you have to change the calculation based upon the level of granularity, which is how do you keep track of that in your workbook?
How do I keep track of it?
Well, I mean, if we're not looking at it aggregated by franchise, if we're just looking at it on sheet 12 with all of the by player, you have a different calculated field that you use at the highest level of detail than you use at a more aggregated level of detail.
I would just be careful with the naming of your fields then. So I would probably, like here, I've called this one strikeout ratio aggregated. I might call the other one, disaggregated or something like that.
So what if I change the aggregation on sheet 13 to be division instead of franchise? If we did for major league versus or American, by league, would this still work?
Yes, this calculation will still work. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So the question Sofyan was asking, let's just hit OK here for now. Let me finish my thought here. So we should now have a new field on the data pane. Let's set our default number format. So if you right click on it, go to default properties number format, and let's just pick percentage. And then OK. And drag that field onto the measure value shelf. And you see now we get the proper number. Okay. If I go, and you all can just watch for now, if I go back to the previous sheet where we had the most granular level of data, if I drag my aggregated calculation into this view, you'll see that I still get the correct number, right? See how they're still matching? So if you aggregate something that is already at the lowest level, then it doesn't really matter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sofyan, I think that's what you were referring to, right?
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I typically start with an aggregated calculation, unless I know there's a reason I'm going to need it to be disaggregated. Okay, bye, Emily. So let's look at an example then. Do you mind if we keep going down this path? Does everybody feel like this is important enough to keep going down before we get really into table calcs and LODs? Okay. All right. So we were talking about, okay, yeah, let's do this. So we have a calculation now. Let me clear this sheet. for our strikeout ratio, right? The non-aggregated calculation. I'm going to create a new calculated field, and I'm going to call this, I'll call this high strikeout ratio. And I don't know what's considered a high ratio anymore, since the game has changed quite a bit. But I'm going to say something like if, and let's drag on our SO ratio field. Let's say if that's greater than, I don't know, 0.3, 30%. That seems pretty high. Then, and I'm just gonna make this a string. So I'm gonna use a single quote. You can use double quotes if you want. And I'll call this high, else low, and then end. Okay, so really simple if-then statement. Okay, so that's right, Rob. Yep, same thing. Yep. So let's hit OK, and let's see what would be the easiest way to look at this. Let's drag the franchise field onto the rows, and I want you to right-click and drag the player ID field. So right-click and drag player ID to the columns. And we want to choose count distinctive player ID. So we want to know how many players were on each franchise. Okay, something super simple like that. And notice this new calculation that we did called high SO ratio. That's in the dimensions area, isn't it? Everybody should have that in the dimensions. And it's in the dimensions because it is not an aggregate calculation. So if I look at this calculation again, my field SO ratio is not an aggregate. So this is so what that means is this is a dimension. So if I put this field in the view, Tableau is going to increase the level of granularity, right? Dimensions are things that split up the view. If you look on the bottom left-hand side, I have 30 marks. Does everybody have 30 on the left-hand side? Okay. Let's drag high SO ratio onto the color shelf. And this now tells us we now have, 60 marks, because each team has some players that have a high strikeout ratio and some players that have a low strikeout ratio. So we've split up the view by those players. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. Let me go back. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, just double checking something there. Now, one thing we could be seeing here, the same player could actually be in the both high and low, because the player because in one season they might have been a high strikeout ratio, another season they might have been a low strikeout ratio. Okay, so just beware that players could be in both categories. To fix that, to make sure we don't get confused, let's drag the year field to the filters, and we'll just pick the most recent season, 2023. Because every player can only be in one of these conditions in a single season. Okay, there we go. So that's better. Okay. So again, we're looking at a non-aggregate calculation. So for each player, we're bucketing them into either a high strikeout ratio or a low strikeout ratio. Make sense? Okay. What I want you to do now is on this same view, right-click and drag player ID to the columns next to the other one, and choose count distinctive player ID. So it's just going to give us another bar chart, but this one, okay, and it just split it up again, which I was hoping it wouldn't do. And now here on the marks card, you'll see you have two of the same thing. One says, they both say count distinctive player ID. Go to the bottom one of those. And you should have high SO ratio on color. Just go ahead and take that off. And this time we're going to calculate a high strikeout ratio, but we're going to do it at the aggregate level. So let's create a new calculated field. Let's call this one high strikeout ratio ration aggregate. Does anybody else type ration when they type ratio? Maybe I'm trying to ration my ratios, something like that. Okay, so we're going to do something very similar. This time we're going to say if, but we want to bring in our field from our measures called strikeout ratio aggregated. So if that is greater than 0.3, then high, else low, and then end. Okay, so what Tableau is doing now is it's looking at that aggregated number first, and then it's deciding it's going to categorize it. Because strikeout ratio aggregated is an aggregate, right? Inside of that calculation, we have sum of strikeout divided by sum of at bat. This field is going to become a measure. So if you look down here in the bottom, you'll see high strikeout ratio aggregated is in our measures. And it's in our measures because it's an aggregate. Whew. Okay, so on our second player ID shelf on the marks card, the one that you don't have anything on color, drag that new field onto the color shelf. All right, great. And you see we only have one, each bar only has a single color because at a total level for each franchise, they can only be one condition at a total level. Okay, so let's see. Minnesota, overall, they have a high strikeout ratio as a team. Nobody else does. Okay. Does that also help with clarifying aggregate versus non-aggregate? Yeah? Okay. Excellent. So we've kind of beaten that to death now, I think. So let's quickly now look at, we're not going to be able to go into a ton of detail with table calcs and LODs because I want to make sure that, you know, we could have stayed with aggregate, non-aggregate for another hour, but we'll kind of move on here. Oh, and before I forget, there is a new members orientation if you want to come next Monday. Every Monday morning, you'll get an email and also a Slack message for the links to the classes and the topics that are covered for that week. Or actually, there's a calendar, but on Monday, there's going to be a new members orientation. So I'd encourage you to come to that. We'll do a bit of Q&A. So that's next Monday. Anyway, so table calculations. So these are calculations that are performed on data that is already in the visualization. So Tableau has gone off, it's done its query, it's drawn the picture in Tableau. A table calculation is then a calculation that gets performed on that data. Okay. So what do we mean by that? So they kind of help you with some additional insights. I'm going to skip some of this stuff so we can get through it a bit quicker. So we're just going to start with a very simple example. We're going to look at, we're going to just create a stacked bar chart that has home runs by year split up by the divisions. Okay, so let's go over to Tableau, create a new sheet. Let's go up to the top and drag year to the columns. And if you go down, we want to drag home runs, HR onto the rows. And we get something like that. You should get a bar chart. What happened in 2020? Anybody remember those couple of years?
COVID.
I can't believe it's 2024 already.
But look how quickly it bounced back.
It's been 4 years since COVID. Isn't that crazy? Okay, now I've lost my train of thought. Okay, so we're going to take this and we're going to split it up by, let's see. So down here in the bottom, we have a field called division. Let's drag that onto color. And this tells us what is the split across the divisions. Okay. Now there's also an American League and a National League that split it up as well. So let's go to the top and let's take the league field and let's drag that onto the columns. No, let's put it on the rows. We'll make it easier. Okay, so for each league, we have the number of home runs by year split up by division. Okay, so this is your standard kind of stacked bar chart. Okay, so a table calculation we might want to do here to give it a bit more context is a percent of total table calculation. So for example, we want to know for the American League in the year 2000, what is the ratio of these three divisions, right? So to do that, we're going to right click on the sum of home run field. And if we go down to quick table calculation, you'll see an option called percent of total, a percentage of total. So if you click on that, if you look on the very bottom of Tableau, on that status bar down the bottom, you'll see it says 200%. Well, that doesn't seem right, does it? What does a percent of total usually add up to? Usually 100. 100%. But what we want is we want each of these sections, right? We want this bar to add up to 100. I'm going to sneeze. We want this bar to add up to 100. We want this bar to add up to 100, right? We want each of them to add up to 100. So we have a combination of 24 years times 2, so that's 48. So we should have 4,800 is actually the number we're looking for down here at the bottom. Does that make sense? So 4,800. Oh, Lisa, I passed my sneeze on to you. All right, so let's see what Tableau is doing here. So on the sum of home run field, notice we have a little triangle or delta symbol. That's the indicator that you have a table calculation. Right click on that field and go down to the option that says edit table calculation. Okay, and now we get these different options here: table across, table down, table, pane, whatever, right? Thumbs up if you are a person that just picks one of these until you get it right. Thumbs down. Oh, liars.
So
almost everybody, when they start using Tableau, will just choose through these options until it looks right. Okay. So ideally what we're looking for, so what Tableau is doing right now, it says table across. And this option down here at the bottom, it says show calculation assistance. Do not ever uncheck that. It is your best friend. And this is the reason I say don't turn that off, is because we can see how it's highlighting the American League here, right? It's going across the view. That's what it means by table across. So the things that are highlighted are going to add up to 100. Okay. And so if we switch that to, for example, table down, okay, so now it looks like we have 2,400%. So what Tableau is doing here is it's taking these 6 bars. That's still not what we want. If we choose table, oh, can you all still hear me? Okay. If you choose table, that number now is 100%. So it's considering every segment of every bar and adding them all up to 100. Doesn't make sense. So we keep hunting and pecking. We try pane down. Oh, that looks like it did something. Okay, and then we double check. So pane, cell, I don't know what the hell is going on here, but pane down looked like it was correct. All right. Is that what most of you would do? Okay. And then naturally, you just click the close button, right? I mean, if you just hit close at this point, you just close it. But look what happens. If I move the league field, just watch for now. If I move the league field from year to columns, oh, that still worked. Sorry, wrong way. If I move the year field to the rows, well, it didn't break like I was hoping it would. So ignore me. Trying to break the calculation.
It only breaks when you need it to work, Andy.
Of course.
From experience.
But what I would do is there's nothing wrong with doing this hunting and pecking, right? Because sometimes that's just what you need to do to figure it out. But once you have it correct, click on this option that says specific dimensions, and that's going to kind of lock the calculation in. So now, no matter where I move my dimensions, it's still going to work. Okay, so go ahead and do that. And then I'm gonna try to break it again. So I'm gonna hit undo. So it should now be pane down. Okay, so if I move my division field over here, okay, yeah, you see what happened now? If I move division there, it now says 14,400. Doesn't look right, does it? Doesn't look right to me, at least. But that's because if I go now and look at this calculation, it still says pane down, but it's no longer correct. Okay, so that's why once I get the calculation correct, I'm going to choose this option that says specific dimensions. And we'll go through what that means in a second, what this window means in a second. But if I now drag, I'm going to leave that window open. If I now drag division to the columns, notice everything still adds up to 4,800 at the bottom. And you see I've got this one section highlighted. You see that there? So that's telling me that those 3 bars are what adds up to 100%. Well, those 3 bars are my division field. If I move it back to color, I just have this 1 bar. So it's really doing the same thing. It's just, splitting it out. So that's why it's important, once you have the calculation correct, to choose the specific dimensions option. Okay. So what will, so we went through that. Okay, that's good. So this is how I would read that calculation. And there, I will remember I'll put a slide in the attachments for this video once it goes, the recording is up on Next Level Tableau. So this is how I would read this field. Okay. So I'm going to say yes, Lisa.
Go ahead, finish. I can ask when you're done, Andy.
Okay. So the way I would read this is, let me bring up the other window, actually. It might be easier. I'm going to say, because it's different. I'm going to say for each league and year, I want to compute the percent of total by division. Okay, so what this means is every time I hit either a new year or a new league, I want you to restart the percent of total calculation. Okay, if you are familiar with SQL, this is like a group by. The unchecked boxes are like your group by. Okay, so I'm going to say for each league or year, we want to compute the percent of total by division. So when I say by, that means, well, what is adding up to 100%? What field am I using to add up to 100%? Well, I'm adding the 3 divisions together to give me 100%. Okay, does that help? Okay, and there's a slide that I will or a little image that I will post in the up with the materials. Okay, so let's look at another example then, and I want you to do this one on your own. So I want you to build this view. Just first I'll filter it down to, actually we'll build it together and then you can do the percent of total yourself. Okay, so let's create a new sheet. And we're going to have the league field on the rows. Oh, sorry, no. Take that off. Sorry about that. Drag the year field to filters. And we want to choose 2021, 2022, and 2023. And we're only doing that just so it fits in the screen nicer. And then click on OK. Drag the year field into the rows. So you should now just see 3 rows.
Could everyone please mute because they're.
Hang on, I need to mute Melissa. Oh, it's not letting me. Oh, she's muted already. Okay. So we have the league there, and then we want to split this up by league and division. Okay. So we have year. Let's drag league onto the rows and then division onto the rows. Okay, so we've got those 3 bars, or sorry, those 3 bars, those 3 fields. Okay, so Christy Sullivan, what is our level of granularity in this view?
We've got year, league, and division.
Exactly right. Yeah. So dimensions that are in the view determine our level of detail or our level of granularity. Okay, and then we're going to look at, what are we looking at? Home runs. So let's drag the HR field to the columns. And I almost always sort my bar charts. So on the toolbar across the top, I'm going to click on this sort descending button. Okay, and to make it a bit easier to view, let's change the fit from, so up here on the toolbar, change the fit from standard to entire view. It just makes it a bit easier to look at. And one other thing we can do to make it easier to look at is to drag the year field again from the data pane onto the color. I'm just trying to split it up so we can see it a bit better. What else could we do? I think that's okay for now. So what we want to do is I want you to set it up so that these 3 bars add up to 100%. These 3 bars add up to 100%, etc. So each of these sections is going to add up to 100%. Make sense? Okay, so this is what you are trying to create. Your turn. Okay. Let's give it another second here. Just thumbs up when you're done. Thank you. Very good. Can you hear the kids next door? No? Okay. They're quite loud. Okay. Who needs a bit more time with this? Just unmute yourself.
My Tableau crashed, so I'm not ignoring the thumbs up. I just can't do it quite yet. I'm trying to read it.
No problem.
I do have a question, Andy.
Yes.
Just since others are done. I've had someone tell me when using the specific dimensions to make sure, because most of my table calcs aren't just by one dimension, they'll often be by multiple. So someone told me to make sure and order the dimensions in the menu as they appear in the view to help, because sometimes I guess the order of them makes a difference. Have you found that? Over.
Yeah, there are situations where that matters, but they're not very frequent. Most of the time, the checked and unchecked boxes, it doesn't really matter what order they're in. The check boxes, or sorry, the check boxes will always be above the unchecked boxes. But whether you rearrange, the checked and the unchecked compared to each other, there's a few situations where that matters. It's way beyond what we're doing today. But yeah, generally it doesn't matter. It's more important to get the calculation right. Sufyan?
Yeah, quick one, Andy. So it's choosing between the table down, pen down, everything. Is that just using the figures in there and just check which ones works as you desire, or is there like a rule of standards that we have to follow?
No, it depends on the question that you're trying to answer, right? Or the use case. So for us, we're trying to figure out, for each year in league, we want to know the percent of total home runs by division. So which divisions had the highest percentage of home runs in each year in each league. So it's use case dependent.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else need any more time? Okay. So the way that I would do this is I'm just going to right click on the sum of home run field, and I'm going to do it without doing quick table calculation because I think that's the cheating method. I'm going to go to add table calculation. I'm going to choose percentage of total. And my question was, for each year in league, calculate by division. Okay, so for each year in league, to me, I'm going to go down to specific dimensions. I'm going to uncheck year and uncheck league. And I want to do it by division. So I'll check division. It's a bit counterintuitive. You would think that by means check those boxes. Or sorry, that anyway, you know what I mean. If you just remember that the logic is backwards with the unchecked, checked and unchecked boxes, then you're fine. Okay, and then if I just turn my labels on, you'll see that I get the right numbers. Okay, great. All right, so that is kind of, I think I'm going to skip some of these so we can get to, I'll share the slides as well. What we're going to do is I just want to make sure that here's a good rule of thumb. Generally you want, let's see, where is my rule of thumb? Yeah, okay. Where the hell's my slide? Sorry. There's a lot more in here. Okay, so here's my rule of thumb. If all of the dimensions that you need for the value you're trying to compute are in the view, meaning the dimensions are already in the chart, start with the table calculation. Okay. How many of you would start with an LOD no matter what? It's okay to admit it. Rob's halfway. He's undecided, right? And sometimes you start with LODs because you understand them, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But the biggest issue is that LODs can give you a performance hit, whereas table calculations are based on data that Tableau has already queried. With an LOD, Tableau has to run an additional query on the data source. So if you have a huge data set and you're running a bunch of LODs, you're querying the data that many more times. So try to use a table calc if you have the fields you need in the view. Yes, Tom.
So Andy, I use fixed a lot when I use LODs. I cannot come up with a good use case for include or exclude in the LODs. Is that right, or am I missing some secret superpower there?
There are some cases, but I haven't found a case where I can't work around it with a fixed. I almost never use an include or an exclude. So yeah, so David's saying it can work better with some filters.
On David's point, I found one trick. Include I found pretty much useless. Exclude, someone framed it for me really helpfully in that it is almost like a very boxed table calc that you can control sometimes when people filter too much it starts to mess with table calcs, but an exclude will help you tailor a table calc to a view, which I found useful.
Okay. But I would typically take that exclude. My biggest issue with an include and exclude is, well, there's a couple things. First off, they're very difficult for people that are picking up your work to understand what it's doing. It's impossible to give them an accurate. It's impossible to give them an accurate name because they're dependent on the other fields that are in the view. So I've seen where somebody will say, you know, let's say they have a view that has region and category in it, and they say, and they want just the region level sales, and they might say exclude category, right? It's a valid it's going to bring back the correct value. They're going to name that sales by region, but next time if they use that same field again, but region isn't in the view, then what happens, right? Or category isn't in the view. So naming fields is quite difficult to get it correct. You know, you probably would have to say sales excluding category, but then good luck explaining that to somebody, right? So I also like using fixed because I have control over the filtering, where you have more control over the filtering than you do with an include and an exclude. Okay, so let's just go through a couple of, we've got about 25 minutes left. I'm starting to get the evil eye from outside that it's time for dinner. Oh, they're hiding. Okay, they can't see me right now. They're on the other side of the wall. But the biggest thing that I love at level of detail expressions, they're super, super powerful. And you should you should use a level of detail expression when you need to change the level of granularity of the view. Okay. So what defines our level of granularity? What type of fields define our level of granularity? Our dimensions, right? The dimensions in the view define our granularity. Okay, so what that means is if you need to do a calculation for a different level of a different level of detail, that's when you use a level of detail expression. Hence the name level of detail, because you're specifying the level of detail to perform the calculation. So that's why at the very beginning, we talked about the concept of level of detail. You have to be aware of what the level of detail is of your view in order to create the correct calculation. Okay, so there's three types of LODs. We're only going to go through fixed. If you want to look into a deeper dive of include and exclude, in the playlist for workshops, there was a workshop just on LODs. So you could go back and have a look at that if you want. There's also one on table calculations. So that's like 2 hours just on table calcs and LODs. So, and if you're unsure where those are, if you go to if you're on the home screen, oh, you can't see my screen. So that would make it difficult. Let me pull this over here. If you're on the home screen and you go inside of the platform or inside the, you'll see we've got all these buttons here. If you go to workshops, then you can see all the previous workshops. And this is the one from yesterday that we did yesterday. And yeah, so everything else you need is here as well. And here's the training calendar, by the way, you can subscribe to it if you want. Okay, anyway, enough of the, back to our regularly scheduled program. Okay, so we have different types of level of detail expressions. The thing I like about a fixed level of detail expression is that I can specify the exact level of granularity I want it to use, which also makes naming the calculation very, very simple, right? Somebody can easily pick up a level of detail expression calculation and know what it does if you give it a proper name. Okay, so what happened here? There we go. And this is the general syntax. So you're going to start with, what are those things called on the beginning and the end?
Mustachios or
Mustachios.
Mustachios, very good. That's what I like hearing. Everybody's calling them mustachios now. Excellent. Do you use them as, do you call them mustachios when you explain them to other people?
No.
No?
we use them as flower
Curly
brackets.
Curly bracket.
Curly brackets. You're all
They just
wrong.
became mustachios, without a doubt.
Okay. Very good. Very
Yes.
good. Thank you.
Take a second brackets.
Okay. If you say mustachio, it'll work in all cultures. So, not curly braces, curly brackets, squigglies, whatever you want to call them. Anyway, the syntax is fixed, and then whatever dimensions. So the dimensions means this is the level of granularity that you want it to calculate at, right? That's our level of granularity. And then it always has to be some kind of aggregated measure. So it has to be an aggregate. A good way to think about this, we'll get into an example here in a minute. If you are familiar with SQL, this section here is your group by fields. Okay, so you could say something like, select region and category, and then sum of sales, group by region and category. That's what the left-hand side of this means. Okay, so if you're familiar with SQL, LODs are exactly like that. Okay, so let's go, let's see here. Let me go again. So here's an example of how we would read these. So I did this earlier with the table calcs as well. So the fixed part, this would be my for each. So for each franchise, compute the sum of home runs. Or if you like saying group by, you could say compute the sum of home runs grouped by franchise. Both of those work. Okay, I see some of you nodding your heads with the group by, and some of you for the for each. So whichever way works for you. Okay, the left-hand side is your group by or your for each. Okay, does that help? Yeah. Maida, yep.
I got a question. Can we have more than one dimension in the after the fix, just like grouping by several things?
You can have as many as you want. So for example, thank you for queuing me up for that, for this. I appreciate that. So in this example, we're saying for each franchise and year, give me the average number of home runs. Something like that. Okay. So let's actually look at an example similar to this. So let's go back over to Tableau, and we want to look at, let's see, let's drag the year field, the league field onto the view. And how could we split this up? Let's say, okay, let's drag division to the rows. And let's drag, let's see, what's another way we could look at this? We want to look at, okay, so what we're going to try to get to is we're going to try to find the average number of home runs by league. Okay, so if we drag home run onto the table, we get something like that. And what we want to return is the average across the divisions. Okay, another way to figure this out is if you go to the analytics pane, and you drag on the totals, and let's just put it on subtotals. Don't worry about the grand totals, just do subtotals. Okay, you'll see the total says 61,000. So Tableau by default, the subtotal is the same aggregation as the field, right? So it's a sum, but we can click on that. If you click on 61,000, and then you click where it says automatic, you can change that to be an average. Okay, so that's the number we're trying to get to. Okay, everybody good with that?
Sorry, Andy, quick question. So the measure pill still says sum on the marks card. Isn't that a little confusing?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm just trying to show you what number we're trying to get to. That's all. I would probably not do that. if I was going to do that, what I would do is I would edit the I would format the total, and I would probably just call this average, like that. That would make it more clear. Total, implies sum, I think. Yeah. Okay. So that's the number we're trying to get to. So let's create a new calculated field. And let's call this, we're going to do an exclude first. How about that? Should we do that? Everybody's favorite friend. Again, excludes, I think, are in the order of understanding. It goes fixed, exclude, then include, I think. I think include are by far the most difficult to understand. So let's call this home runs excluding, no, let's call it average home runs excluding division. You see how what does that even mean, right? I mean, we know what it means because we're writing it now, but picture being somebody else that picks this up. Okay, so what we're wanting to do here is we're wanting to start with an exclude LOD. So you don't have to type the mustachio in. You can just start typing exclude, and Tableau will put it in there for you automatically. And again, I like building it as a table first, because that way I can just drag the fields into the view. So I've got exclude. Okay, so I want to exclude division, so I'm going to drag division in. And then once you're done with your dimensions, you put in a colon. And then if I drag, let's see what happens if I drag in sum of home runs. Okay, we'll just leave that like that for now. And then close off our mustachio. So what this should return is basically the total for each league, which was what, 60,000-ish, something like that? Yeah. So the way that I would read this calculation, if we go back to the other direction, the image we have here, I would say, see, it's where the exclude's hard. You have to know what other dimensions are in here. I would still say for each league, give me the total home runs. Right? Because we're telling
Andy, maybe like the way that we frame it in my shop is like ignoring division.
Yeah.
Calculate.
Yeah. 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 It could be ignore the division and give me the sum of the home runs. Right?
Just like we do with the empty boxes on the table calc. It makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Think of it backwards. Yeah. Okay. So let's hit OK there and drag that field on top of the table. And we should get 61,000. Okay. Perfect. No problem there. But we wanted to get the average. Okay, so right click on that field in the data pane and choose edit. So let's see what happens if we change our aggregation from a sum to an average. Okay, I'm just going to hit apply and I get 4. What the hell does that mean? Anybody have any idea what that means? So what Tableau is doing here is it's looking at the lowest level. It's looking at every combination, basically the lowest level of granularity and taking the average. Right? So this is where a fixed becomes very, very complicated. So we know this isn't right. So we would probably have to, gosh, how will we even do this? I'll show you how I would do it. I would close this window. I'm going to take that field off of the measure values. Okay, so it should just go back to the table. And this is the most important step here. If you right click in the data pane on that field that says average home runs, excluding whatever, I would choose the delete option. That's the best way to handle the situation. Okay, so let's see if we can figure out how to do this with a fixed level of detail expression. So let's create a new calculated field. And let's call this average home runs per league. And let's just start with the sum to make sure it's that we at least get kind of the structure of it right. So I'm going to start with fixed. I'm going to fix it at the league level. And then colon, and I'm going to do sum of home runs. Okay, and then just close off the mustachio. Let's leave this calculation window open. So click on the apply button. So that keeps the window from closing. And now you should see that field pop up on the left-hand side. And drag that on top of the table. And we get the same number we had before, right? Okay, so let's see what happens now. Let's change that sum to an average. And click on apply. And we get back to those same damn numbers. Frustrating, right? So what there's several ways we could handle this, but this is where I like to use a nested level of detail expressions. We're getting kind of deep pretty quickly. Because what we want Tableau to do is we first wanted to return the number of home runs by league and division, right? Because that gets us these numbers. Okay, so let's do this. Let's fix this calculation on league and division. And then make it the sum of home runs. Click apply and the numbers should match exactly the same. Okay, so that's the first part of the calculation. But what we want to do now is we want to take that result and we want to average that result. Okay, so what we want to do, so I'm going to move that down a line. And I'm going to create another level of detail expression. So I'm going to say fixed, but this time I'm only going to fix at the league level.
And then I do the sum, the average.
And then colon. And then I'm going to wrap this in an average. Right? Because we brought back our 3 values and then we want to average those. Click on apply and we should get the right number, 20,430. Okay, so let's think about what Tableau is doing here. Did everybody get that same number? Should have. Okay, so calculations in Tableau work inside out. So the first thing Tableau is doing is it's running this inside calculation. It's saying, go to the data source. Basically, you can think of this as like returning a table, like with 3 columns. It has 1 column for league, a column for division, another column for the sum of the home runs. So Tableau is kind of returning a table. And then we're saying, okay, you've given us those results, but now I want to take the average across those results. And that's where the outer calculation comes in. Okay, so calculations work inside out in Tableau. They do in math as well. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. So let's see here. So we did that. The impact of context filters. Okay. This is also really good advice here. If all the dimensions are in the view already, don't start with an LOD, or you don't need an LOD most of the time, right? So this is where in this example, we actually could have gotten this number with a with a table calculation because all of the dimensions we need are already in the view. Okay, so people are saying you can hear somebody's TV. I can't hear it, but maybe that's because I'm talking the whole time. Rob, you're hearing it? Okay, Rob's hearing something as well. There's a few of you hearing something. Do you have a TV in your head, maybe? Is there like you watching a TV show in your head or no?
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 people that aren't muted, and it's one of those 3 or 4, and it's playing in their background, whatever it is.
Okay, let me see if I can find them, and I will mute them. So that's me.
The problem's being fixed.
Okay. Because you muted yourself, Ojo? Is that it?
No, I don't want to take the name, but it wasn't me.
Okay. Okay, and I think there were a couple questions. Were there a couple questions? Sorry, I pulled up the wrong thing there. Katie Kilroy?
Yeah, when you brought out the on the analytics pane, at the very start of this exercise, we brought up home runs. You went to the analytics pane and you dragged out the total. And you said subtotals. Is there a way to, apart from eyeballing the math, and I can see that 19K, 22K, 19K does not add up to 20K. Is there any way to notice that the user did that apart from just eyeballing the math? Like, is there any?
Yeah, I mean, if I needed to present this as an average, right, I needed to show it the way that it is.
Yeah.
What I would do is I would right click where it says total here, and I would choose format.
And just change the label.
And I would rename the label to average.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
But if you
really the
inherit
only
a
way to do
workbook-
it, probably. Yeah.
Okay. If you inherit a workbook, that could be something that you might not notice.
Yeah.
You know,
I got a question.
And then you track down the person and you kick him in the ass.
Or column header, the column header help, pardon me, helps.
Yeah.
I got a question. When you did that, when you went in the analytics pane and dragged it, how did you? I guess it was quickly, and I couldn't figure out how do you change it to the average.
Okay, so yeah, let's see. Let me just build a new sheet. That way I don't mess up what we have. So let's just, I don't know, I'll just do something like this. Doesn't really matter. Hits. And when I bring in the average, so I want to change it to an average. So I'm going to bring in totals. I'm going to put on my subtotals, right? So I think you saw that part, right?
Okay, yeah, so
and then down here where the total is, if I click on that number, you get this little toolbar that pops up.
yeah,
Now, when it says automatic, that means it's going to use the same aggregation as the field. Okay.
Thanks.
But I can change it here to average, minimum, maximum, whatever. So if I choose average there, then that's the average of those numbers. Okay. All right. I think Sofian.
Yeah. For example, this one you said it's easier if we've got all dimensions there to do it by table calculations. Is it just changing the ticks and we will have that?
You mean if we were to do it with a table calculation?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the table calculation we would do here, essentially it would be kind of like, well, let's just write it. So if I do a new calculated field, and I'll call this one average home runs. It's not necessarily per league though, right? Because it's dependent on the dimensions that are in the view.
Yeah.
So I'll just call this average home runs, and I'll just put TC in parentheses for table calc. Probably should give it a better name than that. But this is where we would use a calculation called a window average. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the sum of the home runs. So I'm just going to drag it in there. Again, building it out as a table helps. So I just want to take the average across the home runs. So first I'm going to compute the home runs, and then I'm going to compute the average across the window. Now we are going to tell Tableau by checking and unchecking boxes what that means, what a window is. So let's just hit OK and drag that field onto the measure value shelf. And you'll see the numbers are slightly different, right? You see how they all say 2568 all the way down?
Yep.
So that means it's computing it across the entire view down. So I'm going to guess it's table down. Okay, so I'm going to right click on that average home runs TC and choose edit table calc. And you are going to tell me what I need to do now. And you're not allowed to hunt and peck. You have to choose specific dimensions and then tell me what to check and uncheck.
Yeah, click on specific dimensions.
Okay.
And if I want to group by league, so uncheck league.
Very good. Exactly. So you've got the logic backwards in your head already. Well done.
Thanks.
See, once you figure out that the logic is backwards, then it's no longer backwards.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's you know, there's a bunch of additional exercises we didn't get to, but in the chat, this is something that is required at the end of every session. In the chat, what did you like best today? And let's see what everybody, okay, what's an example with baseball data of when we would need to use an LOD instead of a table calc? Oh, that's a good question. So I might want to look at, let's say I want to look at the average number of home runs for a team across their existence versus the home runs for this season. That would be an example. Nested LODs, confirming table calcs logic is indeed backwards. Yep, breakdown of where, all right, LODs, subtotals, changing the subtotals. Okay, SQL, very good. Nested LODs, comparison from a group to whole when you use LODs. Table calc checkboxes, all LODs. All LODs, okay. All right. Let's see. So David Liska. So you said use LOD instead of table calc if you want the result not to be affected by the filters. Generally, that's true for fixed LODs, unless you want to force the filter to happen first. But generally, yes, that's going to be true. Okay. Yes, Rob.
So one of the questions that I have is, when you made the change to the calculation, the table calc after it was made, and like usually when we see the calculation, it will have in there like table across, it'll be in the comments or in the description. So when you're building it from scratch, like coding it, I guess I could say,
yeah.
How do you get it to change the orientation and how you want to do it? If you want to do a pane calculation or you want it to move across instead of down, whatever the default is.
You mean kind of by default, or?
Yeah, well, yeah, because
yep.
like if you look at the actual calculation itself, one of the ones that you made that shows as a calc, it'll have like, see how it says results are done with table across. So if I'm building it from scratch in this view, like typing out with the dimensions, variables, and all the rest of that, how do I get it to orient the table calculation to a different, either go by pane or change the direction from across to down without having to go into the calc and then change it in the widget and then go back? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know why it says this, because if everything is going down the view, it's going to make a table down. So I'm not quite sure why it does that. You can, if you know you're only ever going to use it for certain fields, you can do this default table calculation. And so this is set up as automatic right now. So what I could do is I could say, I want to compute this. So by, let's see, league. And then let's see, let's go. Okay, so it's not even letting me pick. Oh, no, here we go. I want to go to advanced. So I want to partition it by league. And division would be my, no, that's wrong. Partition, yeah. So that I could set that up as the default for this calculation. So it's going to be computed along division. Okay. So let me drag this field on again, and you'll see now it's working correctly. The problem is if I want to use that calculation again, but I don't have division in the view, let's just say I do something. Oh, that's not a very good example. Let's say I have, let's see, throws, something like that. And I use that calculation that I've set the default for. It's going to break when I put it in the view because division is not in the view. So I would leave it alone and just configure it when you bring it in the view.
Okay.
I got to make sure I didn't break it. Any other questions before we drop off? Okay, so that's fine. All right. Thank you very much. And there are, if you look on the calendar, there's classes tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, office hours on Thursday. If you haven't joined Slack yet, please do. That's where you can get any help you need, any questions you need answered are on there. You'll find it's a great community helping each other. And you should also have an email with the classes for this week. And otherwise, I think somebody had a question. Was that you, Colin?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about the, there was one of the slides that you had. It was mentioning, it was a specific type of filter.
Context?
Context, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
What was that?
So, yeah, so what that means is, so typically with a fixed level of detail expression, I'll pull up a, okay, so this should be a better way to explain it for you. Oops, what happened there? Oh, it's my son's passport. So let me do this. Have you ever seen this before?
No.
Okay, so this kind of tells you the impact of calculations and filters in Tableau. And this is in the bonus materials that are on the homepage. If you go down to the bottom below the course, you can see a button called bonus materials. So basically what happens here is we have a fixed level of detail expression that does not get impacted by a dimension filter. Okay, so if I go back over here, and let's say that I filter out, let's say I filter out the East region. Okay, so let me exclude that. You see my average stays the same. Okay, that's because I have a fixed level of detail expression, and that gets computed before the filters get computed. If I want my level of detail expression to account for that filter, I have to make it a context filter.
Gotcha.
So I right click on that field, add it to context, and now my average is only across those two divisions.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Does that answer your question?
It sure does. Thank you.
Okay, great. Lakshmi?
I had a question.
Yeah, Manda, please go ahead.
I think in the description, there was a mention of if you struggle with calculations and you're getting this message where it seems like you're using aggregated dimensions or calculations and non-aggregated.
Yep.
I kind of struggled with that. I mean, I had run into it several times and figured out how to fix it.
We all have.
But not very, I don't know.
But that's a good question. So a good way to show that. So if we look at, so we created an aggregate calculation and a non-aggregate. So for example, this strikeout ratio is a non-aggregate calculation, correct?
Okay.
Or actually, let's do it a different way. So if I create a new calculated field, and let's just say I want to look at strikeouts, and I want to divide that by, the sum of home runs. I'm going to get that error message because this one is an aggregate and this one is not. So they have to match.
Okay.
So if you get that error message, because sometimes this will be buried. So for example, if I bring in this one, you see I still get that error message, but this doesn't have a sum wrapped around it, right? That's where it gets confusing, because what that means is inside of that calculation. So if you click on that field, you can see the calculation here. It has an aggregation inside of that calculation.
Okay.
So that's usually the place where people trip up the most, is they don't, well, neither one of them have an aggregation, right? It doesn't look like it, but actually one of them does farther downstream. Does that help?
Yeah, I had not even realized that as you place a cursor over it, I'll show you the definition.
On the right-hand side, yeah.
Yeah. Just make sure it's expanded. When I first started, it took me about a year before I saw that.
Yeah, there's a little triangle here. Yeah, make sure you click on that triangle.
It helps you a whole bunch.
Thanks.